We're going to look at computing grades using a weighted averages system. And the grading scale on the sheet here is listed. We're going to get our grades for each of our individual categories from our Canvas gradebook. One of the things to note here is that on this sheet, it lists this first category as class participation, and on Canvas, I think we have renamed it, or I have renamed it as lesson checks. That is the grade that we get for participation, so your lesson checks score is going to go here. So the first thing you'll need to do is go onto Canvas. I'm using a test student scores right now, and I had to manually enter these scores. As you can see, I did not enter very many of them as I was making my sample here. So you'll use your actual scores. Before we look down to those scores, which will be at the bottom of the page, I am going to note that we have to make one little update to the grading policy section of our worksheet. This is from the fall semester, and there has been a change in between semesters here. So we can see that we are using 6%, 12%, 12%, 10 for each of the projects. However, the midterm and final have been changed between the fall and the spring semester. Part of the reason for that is that we had found that students had been doing a little better on the final than they did on the midterm. And we think that that's partly because they were more used to the testing experience by that point. Regardless of the reason, though, we decided that we were going to weight the final exam just a little higher than the midterm. So it still comes up to the same total. We're going to change those weights here to reflect our current syllabus, as you can see here on Canvas. Okay. All right. Now, you do need to be in the web version on a computer here of Canvas, not the app, to be able to see this next view. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and that's where you will find your totals. So for your lesson checks. In my test student, I didn't enter very many scores, so you can see that these are the scores that we would write down in each of these boxes for the lesson checks. The worksheets, they're in a slightly different order. Worksheets are here, Alex is up here. You'll have to make sure that you get these two in the right spot as the order is different on the worksheet. Then it goes down project 1, 2, 3, 4. Go to Canvas and write your scores. I'm not going to use these sample ones here. I'm going to use something else when I write my scores. So if you give me a moment, I will record those scores. As you're recording yours, you pause the video to record your scores. Okay, so I've come back in and filled in some scores that I'm going to use for my example. These are the sample scores. These are actually the class averages for these categories. And by average in this case, I do mean the mean, as we know there are multiple measures of average for our class. So those are the scores that I'm going to use. Make sure that you have your grades recorded for each of these items. Don't use the ones that I have on my page here, as these are sample scores. They're from our class means. Once you have your scores recorded, to calculate the weighted average, that's a long division line here. I'm going to write a huge fraction here. And we are going to multiply our weight, which is the category percentage, by our grade. We're going to multiply these, and then we're going to add all of those up. So I need to write small, even so, to fit them all here. So I'm going to take the 0.06 times mine is 83.01. Your number there will be whatever your lesson check average is, and so on. Plus the 12% of your Alex homework score. And then again, 12% of your worksheet score, 10% of your project 1 score, 10% of your project 2 score, 10% of your project 3 score. Now, I know the project 3s are not all the way graded, so what you see right there may not be your final project 3 score. I have everyone's task 1 and 2 done, and if you turned it in early, you might have scores for all of the parts, but if you turned it on the last day to submit, very likely you don't have your full score there yet. That's okay, you're going to use what you've got there so far. And then my final grade is going to be 12% of the midterm score. I just barely fit it. If you didn't fit it in one line, you need to continue on the next line. That's fine. So I need to add up all of those products. I did skip Project 4 because I don't have the grade for that yet. We haven't done that yet. And I did skip the final because, again, we have not taken our final yet. So I'm going to add all of those things up, and we're going to divide by the sum of the weights that we used. So we used 6%, 12% for homework, 12% for worksheets, 10% for project 1, 10% for project 2, 10% for project 3. I'm going to skip project 4, didn't use that one yet. Then we're going to use 12% for midterm. Okay, so let me get into a calculator. I'm going to pull up decimals. I'm going to clear this. I did this earlier with some different numbers. It did show what I am going to do. So we type all this in. See if I can get it typed in without any typos this time. 6% of my Alex. Move my mouse out of the way there. 12%. That was 6% of lesson checks, right? 12% of Alex. 12% of worksheets. 10% of project 1. Didn't close my parentheses, but I do that. 10% of project 2. 10% of project 3, and 12% of the midterm. Okay, all of that needs to be divided by the sum of the weights. So 0.6%, 12%, 12, 10, 10. So we got our 3 projects and now the midterm at another 12. Okay, so my score, if these grades listed up here are my averages for each category, my weighted average comes out to 84.66%. Okay. Now, if you were doing this on your scores, let me get my tab pulled up here. Here we go. If you're using your scores as they showed up on Canvas, the number that you get should be exactly equal to the one you see in the bottom. I didn't use these scores that we see in this window, so mine is quite different, of course. This was just a sample where I only entered a few of the grades just to give an idea for what it would look like. So I'll say NA, which is what happens if there's no grade entered for this test student. Instead, I have an Excel file that I downloaded grades from, and I colored the individual students' grades white so that you can't see them. And these are the averages per category, and this here is my average for the class. So you can see that the number that I downloaded from Canvas as the average, that would match 84.66%, would match the one that I calculated. Now there's a little difference here. This one does say 84.659 compared to 84.6578. There is a little difference. That's because these values that are in each of these cells do have more decimal places than show up. So even your scores over here, if you wrote down 2 decimal places on these scores, there are more decimal places that Canvas is holding on to behind the scenes in their computation. So the score that you see at the bottom here could be slightly different, but it should be very similar to the one that you got from your computation. If you're getting something very different, than the score you see on Canvas, then you'll know that you may have made a mistake in your calculation, and you'll go back and make sure that you've used the weights and average values correctly in your formula, that your decimal places are in the correct place, and that we have divided by each of the correct weights for the items that we used. If these match, then you're ready to move on to the next step. The next step is going to ask us to predict our score for Project 4. So just what do you think you're going to get on Project 4? You can make any prediction here for Project 4. Okay. Now I'm going to predict, let's see, that the class averages right now for Projects 1, 2, and 3 range between 78% and 90%. So I'm just going to go somewhere in the middle. I'm going to say, let's hope that the class average comes out as say 85. That'll be my prediction. Your prediction could be on the low side. If you say, what's going to happen to my grade if I don't do well on Project 4? So you could put in a 50 or a 60 or something that's low. Or you can say, I know I'm going to do well on this project. I'm going to put in a 90 or 100, whatever you want to choose. So you don't have to choose the same thing as me, again, right here. All right, make a prediction for what you think that you'll get on Project 4 or what you would like to explore your grade with for Project 4. Then we're going to use that prediction from our question number 8 here for Project 4. We're going to use that prediction with both scores of 0% and 100% in the final to determine the highest and lowest possible grades we could get towards the end of the semester. So I'm going to do my lowest and my highest. Now, I need to do all of this again, and including now Project 4 and the final. Since I already have it written here, I know I'm not going to be able to fit it if I even add 2 more things in one line. So I'm going to save myself a little bit of rewriting all of that, and just note that I'm going to take all of it from number 7 on the top, plus, so all of those little bits on the top, plus, now I need to add 10% of 85. And when I'm going the lowest, I'm going to add 18% times 0. So you're going to have a different number here. You might not have picked 85. Pick something that you think that you would like to use. Your number here may be different. But we are all going to use 0 because we're going to predict for what's the worst that could happen. I get a 0 in my final, and what's my grade going to be? What I divide by is going to be all of that from number 7 again, all of those things. Plus, we also need the weight of 10% and the weight of 18%. So I still have this up in decimals. So I can copy that line. So I have all of that from number 7 already typed there. So I do just need to continue and type the 10% times my Project 4 prediction and the 18% times my final. Also, I need to just add on, I already have all the rest in the denominator, so I just need to add on the 10% from Project 4 and the 18% for the final. So if I did 85 on my project and a 0 on my final, my grade would drop down to a 69.5%. Okay. We're going to do this again to find out what the highest possible grade I can get for the class is. So again, I'm going to take all of that stuff from number 7 plus 10% of whatever it is that I have chosen for my Project 4 score, that predicted score. Yours may be different from mine. And this time, 18% of 100, because we're going to say, what happens if I get 100% in my final? What's the highest I could get? And so we need to add on those 2% to the bottom again. So when I copy this, I'm actually just going to go ahead and copy the line 2 here. That's what I had from 0, and the only changes between what I need to do for the lowest and the highest is that my final exam score is 0 or 100. So if I copy this one, this is the only change I need to make my final exam score 100. So the highest grade I'd be able to get is an 87.5%. Right. So my final question, what is the best and worst grade that we could earn for the course? So best, if I have an 87.5%, that would be a grade of 3.5. And the worst, if I had a grade of 69.5%, that would be a grade of 1.5. If you don't know the relationship between the percentage and the points earned, you may pull up your course syllabus. I've got a copy of the syllabus right here. You can get to this file on Canvas. And you can see that grades between 85 and 89 percentage right here would fall into the 3.5 percentage, and then grades from 65 to 69% are going to fall into the 1.5 grade. So you can use your percentage along with this grading scale to figure out what grade you would earn in the class. Okay, a couple more notes just to share. I observe that my grade right now is 84.6%. And the highest I could get is only about 3 percentage higher at 87%, compared to that lowest I could go being quite a bit lower at 69%. The reason that it's only a little bit higher and a lot lower is because my current score is much closer to that projected 100 on the final than a 0 on the final, 84 being already pretty close to 100. So the amount difference between your current score and the target score is going to influence how much improvement you will see. I can only go up to an 87. That's the max I can get with these scores. The lowest I can get, though, is not passing. At 69.75% is going to be a little too low. So I will need to get more than a 0. You could do some further, someone grab the decimal tab. You could do some further playing around and say, oh, that's not passing. So what if I got not a 0, but a 10? I would be passing. So you can say, like, I can do okay on my project, and then if I only get a 10% in my final, I'm still going to pass the class, and it can maybe, hopefully, ease some of your anxiety and allow you to find out what potential grade you could have. You could go the other way and say, if I don't get 100, but if I get a 80, where would my grade end up? So you're welcome to play with these values as much as you'd like to predict for yourself what grades are possible for you to get in the future.